Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Joel, about a little over 50 years ago, closer to 60 years ago, Disney Corporation came out with a movie. Actually, there were a couple movies, but one movie in particular called The Parent Trap, starring a very young lady named Haley Mills, and it was remade into another version some 40 years after that. And it's a cute story. It's a great story about twins, identical twins who were separated at birth and find each other in a camp, and then they conspire together to try to get their parents together. So it's a really nice, heartwarming tale. But I thought of it because you had been posting after your what do we call it? Your hiatus from social media. You began posting again on Facebook, and you posted something about the interrelationship between parental behavior and the behavior of their children. And I thought to myself, well, that's kind of like the Parent Trap in reverse. So I figured I'd title today's episode The Parent Trap and kind of laid down the idea, well, what if it were not the kids who are trying to get the parents together? What if it were the parents trying to get the kids to do stuff?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because that's pretty much what you were posting about, right? I mean, that was it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I work a lot, with families, and, one of the things that's really hard to separate is, when you have children, and for the most part, I go out on a limb here and say, I don't know anybody that baby is born and they say, I want to be the worst parent ever. I don't think that happens often. Okay.
No.
Yeah. I think most people start off with, I really want to be a good dad or mom. Right. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, where did they learn to be a dad or mom? Where did they learn it from their mom and dad? And was that functional or dysfunctional? Mm-hmm. Are they looking at societal norms? Are they looking at, the expectations of your peer class? The neighborhood kids are all going to college, so my kid needs to go to college. And so I deal a lot with the expectations that parents place on children that that they have formed, and they're trying to live their life through their kids often based on what their expectations or making the kids meet their needs. So there's a really good story. I had no idea what the topic was about, but I've had this play out multiple times, but this one happened recently. One of my young men that I work with has become very successful doing online reselling of tickets and online reselling of different products. And he was accepted into the University of Virginia, which is a prestigious university, at least in Virginia. I mean, they tell us they are, but so, in the big scheme of things, I don't really know, but here it really matters. And his mom and dad both went to Virginia. They're the neighborhood, we have what we call the West End over here, where all the people of wealth live, or upper middle class people live. And that's what the standard norm is. You're going to college, preferably University of Virginia. So we met in my office over the summer when the young man was going to tell his parents that he had decided to forego college and he was going to go full time, as he had been doing, in his online business. Now, he was 18 at the time, and of course they were like, no, you don't get to do that. And he goes, I do. And they
Wow.
go, no, you don't. And they went back and forth, and the mom was very frustrated. She said, well, you can't live in our house if you're not going to college. And he goes, I am prepared to buy a house if I need to. And he had made so much money, they didn't realize he had he had over $400,000 saved. So,
oh my God,
he was he was very successful. And when the dad realized how successful this business had been, the dad's like, well, we might want to, maybe we'll do this. And then, and the kid was really good. He said, Mom, Dad, I love you, and everything's great, but you're here as a courtesy for me to tell you I'm not going to college. So we can do this for a while, but you're not changing my mind. And the mom was having a really hard time with it. And the dad finally said, well, you've obviously made up your mind. And if you want to go in the future, we will support that. But if you can make this much money at your age and continue to go forward, he said, well, I just want you to be able to take care of yourself, and you're exceeding that right now. But the mom was like, this is the worst thing that's happened to me in years or so. And she kept going with that. And finally, and I started focusing on that. And I said, but why are you so upset? And she said, and I said, I understand you had your plans and expectations, but the point, and she said, every other mom gets to post the first day of college with their son, and I'm going to be deprived of that. And I said, so what about your son? He doesn't want to go to college. And she eventually came around. She's not an evil woman, but she has this programming, this expectation. So she was created this whole environment of what he was supposed to do. And, she said, well, he's just doing this online thing. He said, so-and-so got a job with, Chase Bank, and so-and-so did this, and so-and-so with a big architect firm. And I go, well, yeah, they're going to make $100,000 a year, maybe in the beginning. And well, that's fine. Your son's with no cost of college is quadrupling what they're making. So I'm not, just making sure you understand. And she quickly realized, and she said, I need to talk to my therapist about this, because I didn't realize I'm projecting all of this on him, that
good for her.
He's not upset. My husband's not upset. And somehow I'm devastated, and I have a very successful son. And, and anyway, it worked out really well. She later even called me and apologized. She said, we were caught off guard. And as I evaluated, I think that's a sound decision, and we support him completely. We're very proud of him. And she said, my ego was driving a lot of that. So this is a lot of what you're talking about. That's that reverse parent trap. When you're living, your children are here, and we are tasked. Our task is to raise them and help them system, but also understanding your child is an individual on their own individual journey. So it's a hard time sometimes. Early, you got to deal with the early stuff. But as time goes on, you got to accept they're going to do what they're going to do. And that's a hard pill to swallow.
Interesting, too, the way you phrase that it's a hard pill to swallow. And the reason I say it's interesting is because I think it's very prevalent.
Yeah.
I think it really is found a lot more frequently than perhaps people even realize.
Right.
And the reason I think that I've never had kids of my own, but I have been involved in, actually led the effort to found a school for kids. And it was a school where the kids were basically in control of their own day, and very controversial and all that kind of thing. One of the really interesting things that came out of that experience was the realization of just how well kids can thrive on their own without the parental influence, which flies in the face of basically the entire culture.
Yes.
Because the cultural belief is parents raise children. In other words, the children grow up to whatever they're going to be because of the parents. What if that isn't true?
And what if all answers are correct here? Because I will also say there are certain cultures where Asian families that I know, and I don't, Lord knows, I don't know anymore. I don't mean that in any other way than, people who are as Asians as that. I know a family I was very close to growing up, and every ounce of every moment of the day of these three young men that we were all, I was friends with the middle one. There was one younger, one older. And every moment of their day, they had some lesson, they had some study group, they had something. It was very rigid, very rigid. Very little unaccounted for time. They all were experts, either at piano or violin. They played tennis competitively. They were accepted, to any university they applied to. All three of them are medical doctors now, doing very well.
Wow.
So, there's, all sides can, it isn't that it can be one thing, it's just, but I come from the belief, and I don't know if these gentlemen now, who are all doctors, were happy or wish they could have had a different childhood or not. But
Sure.
I do believe that, while there can be evidence always argued of sort of anomalous events and maybe culturally have different things affected. But I just think, certainly in American culture, the idea that, the expectations of, who you want your child to be, and we all do. I would love, and I've learned from my three sons, my only expectation the whole time is, they came from, all three of my kids came from a very rough background.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just simply want them to be able to take care of themselves, whatever that means. I want
Sure.
them to be able to provide a living for them and eventually have a family, and whatever skill you need to develop. I have no expectation of what that is. But I do expect something. That's my ultimate thing. You can't, I won't support you if you're going to, sit around and do absolutely nothing toward going. That can't work. That's unhealthy. But you have the freedom to go do what you want to do. So my expectation is just being able to provide a living. Like I told Justin, who had recently turned 18, apply for UPS. Just apply for UPS. Their new contract is outrageously high. Let's get a job with UPS.
Right.
Why not? I think anybody would, it's an incredible contract that they sign. But whatever he needs to do, he needs to do. But I want him to be able to take care of that. But also, I have to battle my own internal fear for him, because when I see him doing something that reminds me of me when I was messing up, and he does it. He's a great kid. I'm just using Justin as an example. He's doing really well. But there are things like, okay, you aren't doing this, or you're not taking school as seriously as you need to take school. And I've told him, I don't care about school in the way that he thinks I care about school. I just need him to graduate high school. That opens up doors. That's all I'm saying. That opens up doors. It is, I don't care if we have all A's or B's or C's or how they're scattered around. Just let's open up that, just for him to understand what that looks like going forward. That's all. But I also have to battle when I see him doing something that reminds me of some of the mistakes I made when I was younger. I will sometimes say, son, you might want to look at this, but also simultaneously realizing I am the person I am today because of those mistakes. So there's sort of a triple or a double or maybe triple-edged sword there. I don't know what the right thing is in this case.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that sword's going to look like. It's got so many edges on it, but I get your point.
I'm picturing a little triangle sword, sort of.
Right.
3 edges. I'm trying to, but it doesn't play well visually.
No, it doesn't.
No, but I think my point was made.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. And by the way, what I said earlier, I don't mean to suggest that parents have no influence on what happens with their kids, because clearly they do. The point that I was trying to make is there is a relatively unstated but fairly popular belief among parents that if it weren't for the parents, the kids wouldn't grow up.
Right.
That they simply would not be able to turn into responsible adults without the parents. Now, I'm not saying this is true for all parents. I'm not saying this is true across the board. I'm saying this is a prevalent viewpoint that is held by many.
Yes.
That's the viewpoint that I'm taking issue with. The idea that even the phrasing, the parent raises the child. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous phrase. It's like, I'm going to wave my magic wand and the kid's going to stretch up to a human being because I did that. Like, no, that's not how it happens.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And there's also sectors of childhood, from 0 to 5 years old. The super involved parent, you know what I mean? The mom literally provide the kid can do nothing without at least the mom at all. The outcome wouldn't be good if the mom or dad wasn't there. Yeah. So we have that. But also more of a psychological or philosophical thing, that when you take a kid and you take them from their family and you put them into some group home when there isn't a caring parent, there's just a sort of a structure there with little direction. the results of those kids are horrific statistically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fascinating discussion of what factors are involved, because kids that are taken from their parents when they're 9 or 10 and put into foster care placements in less than ideal conditions have a 92% chance of going to prison. They die 10 years, 10 to 15 years younger than peers who weren't in foster care. They have addiction rates of 90-something%. So there's factors. It's a fascinating study. I mean, so the nuances are very, it opens my eyes. And again, I wasn't prepared for the topic tonight, which is not shocking. But the idea
we don't usually talk about it much beforehand. I don't know why we don't, but we don't.
Yeah, it works good. But as we're listening to it, because I can see, I just again see so many different factors with it, because there's a lot of evidence. It's like the evidence. One of our random discussions before the show is, is this placebo or not placebo effect happening right now? And I go, does it really matter? And you go, well, probably not. And it's like the answer could be many things. So yes, I agree that like kids given at certain launch, and then they're very resilient and they can sort of guide it themselves. But take away that loving 2-parent family, one parent, the things, quality of stuff often gets reduced. No parent and put into foster care or group homes. It's just very predictable, very consistent over the last 30 years of research that very few escape that. Very few.
And that actually makes sense to me. Of course, the thought that comes to my mind as you're describing that is, what is the environment that they end up in that is not the two loving parents situation? What is that environment made up of, and why is the environment the way it is?
Yes.
What is it about that environment? Because I mean, I also know, and I think you probably do too, we also know of stories of kids who have been in extraordinary situations. One of my favorites is it's an educational story. It comes from a guy who is an educator from India who went into one of the poorest, most undeveloped sections of one of the large cities in India and plugged a computer into the wall of a building on a street at kid level and connected it to the internet. It was in a neighborhood where nobody spoke English. The kids had almost nothing. They basically lived in the street every single day. They were about as poor as you could possibly be. They were pretty much left to their own devices by the parents who were trying to scrap out a living in whatever way they could. And he just plugged his computer in and left it there for a year. It was in English. They didn't know English. There were no instructions. There was no course to take. They didn't even have a school. There was no way for them to be taught how to use this computer. And yet he came back a year later and found that the kids themselves had figured out how to use the computer, taught each other how to speak English, how to write English, how to read English, how to use the internet, and had used the computer to turn it into the first local school in the area. And they were teaching each other. Yeah. They were teaching each other, and they did it without the parents.
Yes.
Clearly, the circumstances that the child is working within can play a positive or a negative role. So that's why I wonder what were the negative factors involved that led kids who are 92% likely to go to prison. What were those factors? How did those factors socially and culturally come about?
Well, and that's a fascinating question. We've done one podcast on the growth mindset, the book written by Carol Dweck from Stanford.
Right.
One of my favorite books. And she basically was asking the same questions we're asking. Like, okay, there's a group of kids that go through horrific conditions and, all unique, and the vast majority of them end up in really bad situations. Mm-hmm. But yet there's this small group, that become wildly successful, that just exceed all expectations. They just become multi-millionaires. They run companies, they do things, and what's the difference? And I think the answer sometimes, like, when you're in the slums of India and there is no expectation, there is nothing, everybody is dirt poor, there's just nothing going on. So there's really no expectations of anything. So they go and learn and they do fine. I think when kids get into foster care system, there's an expectation of negative things. It's expected it's a bad environment. It is, you're expected to go to prison. You're expected to be a screw up. You're talked to as you're a screw up. At least the kids in India had none. I mean, I'm not saying they have a great life, but I think a lot of that comes into what the environment is, that sort of what it's dictating. And if you have no expectation whatsoever, that might be better. And I'll use an example too. It's not the same thing. It dawned on me. So when I got into recovery, everybody was, from my gambling addiction. I ended up at this halfway house, sober living home in Florida that I eventually ended up owning part of. And when I was there, everybody was done with me. I had no connection left. My family wasn't speaking to me for all the money I'd stolen. My friends either cut me off or I was too embarrassed to talk to them. The young lady that probably would have eventually been my fiance clearly wasn't speaking to me. So it was just Joel. There was nobody left.
Right.
And so the 4 or 5, 6 other guys in there, they realized pretty quickly, they all had their wives or their parents or their siblings or somebody checking on them, sending them letters, calling them. And I had nobody. And so several of them sort of reached out to me and said, we're really sorry you're going through this and you don't have any support. And I'm like, yeah. And I noticed it. I'm the only one with no support.
Sure.
And, out of that group of 6 or 7 that started with me all these years later, I'm the only one that stayed in recovery. And I believe having no one to recover for but myself was a good thing. I didn't have the drama of a girlfriend or a fiance involved. I didn't have the expectations of my family and all that involved. I wasn't recovering for them. I had no choice. Do I want to live this way or not? And I recovered. And it's something that plays into this bigger topic. I mean, it's really fascinating when you look at that the answer to the question probably is, what are the expectations in the environment? And sometimes no expectations is better than some, or the wrong expectations.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think that's exactly what it is. It's about the expectations of all the people involved, the expectations of the kids themselves, the expectations of the adults around them, the expectations of the people around them, not necessarily just adults. Could be friends, peers, brothers, sisters, all that kind of thing. But the point is, those expectations, they have kind of a sum to them, don't they? They have like a composite total to them, and that composite forms the framework for that child's development or lack thereof. Let's put it that way. It's amazing how consistently it plays out too, isn't it? I mean, if the expectations are negative, you're probably close to 100% certain that the outcome's going to be negative.
Yes. Well, and I shared examples over the years of various kids I've worked with that were living up to the expectation of being a foster care kid, and they were playing the role. They were acting like little assholes, and they were raising hell in the classroom, and nobody, they were being treated in return that way. They were going to go fulfill that expectation of them. They were going to drop out of high school. They're going to end up homeless. They're going to get arrested for selling drugs, and they're going to go to jail and die young. They were on a path to do that. And one of the effective ways that I work with that population is I'd literally walk them through that. And I said, and people are expecting that to happen from you. And you're living that. You are literally living the expectation. All these people are expecting you to fail. And you're the poster child for this statistic if you continue to act this way. Or you can reverse it on them. You can say, well, I'm not going to play your game. I'm going to reverse what you're expecting. And the ones that we've talked about that have reversed that totally changed their lives. I mean, in fact, everybody around them totally flipped their expectation to, well, this kid can do anything. Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, if the topic is the parent trap, it's really the reverse parent trap. But if the topic is the parent trap, is it a fair hypothesis to suggest that the expectations of a parent or even of any figure in a child's life. It doesn't really matter whether it's a parent. Obviously, a parent's going to have a greater influence than another person's going to have. But let's just limit it to parents for a moment. Is it fair to say that the expectations of a parent will play a significant role for the better or for the worse where the child's development is concerned?
I think that, I mean, I'm excited about the topic. I mean, I may do some more in-depth research of that. I think we're onto something in the parent trap that matters. The expectation, the lack of expectation, they're all different factors here. And, when an expectation precludes the individuality of the child. So when a mom or dad has an expectation that this kid's going to do this, then that's going to, you're precluding that. And I know, here's a good example. So I have, I know a lot of people, but I have this,
Yes, you do.
Yeah, I do. I know a lot of people like this. One of my neighbor's son, he hates individual sports. He's a great little athlete, but he's sort of a skateboarder kind of kid, or he just doesn't like organized sports. Well, his dad was this everything athlete, and so his expectation of his son is to play baseball, and the kid hates baseball, which shows he's smart. And so
our ongoing battle between the baseball fan and the football fan.
Yeah. So, I mean, the kid's pretty sharp, as you can tell by and so but yet he plays baseball for his dad, but he's miserable at every baseball game. It's just, the expectation of dad was, and the dad's like, he's a good dad, but yet he's working through the expectations, or working through the idea, because our expectation a lot of times as parents can be ego driven. I want my kid to do well. I want my kid to, it shows I'm a good dad if my kid is a good athlete. It's not.
It reflects on me.
Yeah, it reflects on me. And, one of the things I learned a long time, and I jokingly said, me being a single parent when TJ was about 12 and Chris was about 9, and you can imagine the chaos of a single dad with 2 boys that age, and we'd come rolling into school, usually late or crazy or something. It was always, everything's cool. And so the principal one day was there, and she said, "Joel, you're amazing how you get this done." She said, she said, "How do you just manage that?" And I said, "Look," I said, "the main thing is we have a rule of the house. Make sure you're wearing pants when you leave the house. Let's start with that." I said, "We get the pants, the shoes, the socks, and the shirt on. We're good. Anything else." I said, "I just wanted to get out the door, and I also don't get freaked out about the other stuff." And I was jokingly saying I've lowered my expectations, but not in a bad way of, I can get caught up in, the idea of, wow, your hair's not combed, or this isn't combed, or I can just simply, when a kid's 9, they go to school, they don't care if their hair's all poofed out, it doesn't matter. Give them a couple of years when puberty kicks in, they're going to be taking showers, combing that hair, brushing those teeth. It's going to take care of itself. You don't need to get lost in all that stuff,
Yeah.
And so learning where to fight your battles and learning not to implant the expectation. When a case that I've failed on that horribly is when my oldest son, TJ, came home one day. No, he didn't come home. He was brought home by a police officer.
Oh, okay. So he came home in a different sense.
In the backseat of a police car. Now, the setting is I was a director of an addiction treatment center in that hometown of Rock Hill, South Carolina. Okay. So everybody knew me, including the cop that brought my son home. And so he rings the doorbell and he goes, "Joel, TJ's in the car. He handed me a bag of pot," and he goes, "I found this on him." And I said, "Oh my God." I said, "Okay." I said, "You're going to take him to jail?" I said, "What are you going to do?" And he goes, "I'm just going to leave with you. You figure it out." And I said, "Are you going to charge you?" He goes, "I'm not charging you with anything. You figure it out." And I gave him the pot back. I said, "Will you throw it away?" Or he handled that for me. And he said, "I'm not even doing a report." He said, "But, I just wanted you to know." And I said, "Okay." So when TJ came in, he was like, "Hey, how you doing?" Like, just nothing wrong. And I said, "Son, yeah." I said, "Son, you just came home back. Please return the pot." And I just get it, and I very seldom, I don't yell at my kids often, but I yelled at him. And I said, give me your cell phone. He had and it sounds stupid now, but he had a Razor. You remember the Razor cell phone?
Yeah, sure.
That was a nice cell phone back then.
At the time,
and,
it was, yeah.
Yeah, and I took this Razor phone and I broke it in half and I threw it on the ground. I said, you will not embarrass me this way.
Ooh, yeah.
And as soon as I said that, I was like, what the hell did I just say? And,
well, that's great self-awareness, by the way.
Yeah. I said, go to your room. You're on restriction for a month. And I sat down there and I'm going, oh, God. And I reflected. And I said, okay. I'm not excited. By the way, I'm not excited you had pot on him, but
Right.
my whole crazy overreaction wasn't about TJ having pot. It was about me being embarrassed.
Especially since you were the director of a major addiction facility.
I am. I have this image, and I testify in court cases, and here my kid is, and like. Right. So I went upstairs and I said, "Hey, buddy," I said, "Look, I am really sorry. I'll get you a new cell phone tomorrow. That's my bad." And I said, "I don't like the fact you have pot. You're too young. That can mess with your brain. But my reaction is far worse than you having pot. And my reaction was based on my ego. I love you. I do not want you to harm yourself, but that's not the way to get you not to do that. So I'm asking that you don't smoke pot anymore. If you do, certainly don't bring it in the house. I mean, just have some discretion. And my goodness, son, don't have it in your back pocket when the cops come up with your stick. It's just, let's use some common sense here." And so, I basically told him, you're not a restriction. I said, my reaction, I sincerely apologize. I love you very much. And that was all about me. And while my reaction was ungodly bad, that was a really good parenting moment for me. And it also taught me that no matter how mad I am, I just go have the kid wait in the room until I calm down. Because, you know what I mean? Because I'll put them a restriction for 5 months over nothing if I'm in the anger of it. And then later, like, oh my God, I put myself on restriction for 5 months. I don't do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and now Justin being my third, he is a really good kid, but I delay response, and I don't have those expectations. I don't do that anymore. But TJ was my first, right. And once I identified, those words came out of my mouth. You will not embarrass me that way. It was not about his well-being. It was about my ego, who I am, and I don't really care what those people think about me. But yet somehow at that moment it meant a lot. It meant a lot.
So is it fair to say then that if you're a parent or you're dealing with a kid on some level from an adult perspective, and you have at least some desire to make sure that you're not negatively expecting things about a kid, is it fair to say that one of the first things to do is simply to learn how to be aware of times when you're doing it? Yes.
And, to me, that's, like when a kid says, but it's my life. Well, it is their life. However, there's always a balance. It's like, I'm a fanatic about, I don't like bugs in my house. I don't think many people do, but I'm a fanatic with that. And
I'm with you.
So I have a rule for my kids. No food's allowed upstairs. No food. Because what happens is it gets sure. left and the ants come in and I freak out because there's ants in the house. So I have an expectation of no food. And upstairs. Right. Downstairs, you clean up after yourself. Well, if we get ants downstairs, that's what you take care of. But I still want it upstairs. I want roaches. We've never had roaches in my house. Never had that. So that's one of my things. So when Justin moved in, he was like 10. I explained to him that there's not to be food upstairs. You can keep all the water bottles upstairs you want, and he's taking advantage of that. But at the end of the day, you're welcome to come down anytime, day or night, and get food. There's no limitation on food. It's not going upstairs.
Right.
And and just understand sometimes expectations have a point. I have an expectation there'll be no food upstairs. There's a reason for that. That's not a behavioral thing for him. It's just a reason behind that. And when he buys his own house, he may have keep food upstairs all the time. That'll be his thing. But to be aware in situations where usually when it's your kid isn't doing in life what you think they should be doing, if you could identify that and realize you certainly want what's best for them, and you may see them making mistakes. It's really hard to let a kid make a mistake, and especially when it's wrong. But I developed a really bad gambling problem. I had 1 million people tell me, you have a bad gambling problem, you need to stop. I didn't listen to any one of them. I didn't. So, everybody tried to help me. I wasn't ready to listen until it got so bad I went to jail. Then I was able to say, I think I have a gambling problem. I really do. And that I was able to do that. So the balance of parenting is you have responsibility as parents to do certain things, but also evaluating what are your expectations based on your standards of life in general. What is, you can make that be known, but forcing a kid against what they're going to do is never going to end well. They're going to end up winning anyway, especially as they get older. I mean, it's all graduated. When a kid's 5, they pretty much just do whatever mom says. It's like, they might talk back, but they'll do it. They don't have a lot of choice, but that puberty hits and they realize they have a voice. The word no becomes very powerful with a lot of testosterone. And,
oh, yes.
yeah. And it becomes more frequent and it becomes more defiant. And
by the way, with the estrogen too, it works with both sexes.
It does. It does. A different mechanism, but maybe even more powerful on some level. But it certainly, as they go and realizing, the journey. When TJ was 13 or 14, he was sitting at the kitchen table and he was doing very well. I was so proud of him. He taught him and his teacher had taught him how to read. He got his grade. I mean, he was back to grade level on everything. I was so proud of him. And so he was sitting at the table eating a peanut butter sandwich, crying. And he didn't cry. He wasn't a crier. And I go, buddy, what's wrong? And he goes, I don't know. I'm just crying. And I realized, he's in the middle of puberty. He had grown 6 inches over the summer. His emotions were all over the place, and he didn't know. And I explained to him. I said, your body, I'm trying not to sound that classical, sex talk, but your body's been adding a lot of chemicals that are going to make you grow really fast. You're already growing quite a bit. He went from the beginning of summer, a size 6 shoe, to the end of summer, a size 11 shoe.
Wow.
So, just so you can imagine all that growth. I said, it's okay. And there's no explanation of doing it. Anything I can do to help you, but you let me know. And he said, there's nothing you can do to help. And I said, but no, I love you. And I can promise you at some point, this is going to stop.
Right.
And that's all I can do. I can't make it. So my expectations, are of like, I feel sorry for him. I wish I could fix it, but all I could do is explain it to him and hope he comes if there's more questions. And, within a couple hours, he was out running around playing with his buddy and everything was fine. So, the idea that these kids are growing and, and a lot of parents get really mad, especially when they, as they become more rebellious and they get older. I'm like, if you were to allow me to take, 2 grams, and this is a lot, 2 grams a lot, of testosterone and shoot it into your body with a needle. And then the next day, me go shoot, a couple grams of estrogen. And let's talk and see how you feel, because you're going to be all over the place. That's what's going on in these kids' body. It's just one day it's testosterone, then it's estrogen, and it's just the body's fighting and developing, and the bones are growing so fast it hurts, and the organs are growing, and they can't get enough to eat. They're miserable. They got acne now. They got all this crazy stuff going on, and it's like So then your expectations of them get even more challenged because they're just not even rational during that period of time sometimes.
So if we've identified that, yes, we want to know what expectations we have and when we are experiencing those expectations. All right, we got
Yes.
that far.
Yes.
Then the next step, I think, is actually the more challenging step, because the next step requires some foresight that can often be hard to acquire. And it comes down to this: is the expectation helpful or harmful to the kid?
Yeah.
And very often we don't know.
Well, you don't know. And one of the things that people don't realize they can do with their kids, because they act like they're not listening. They're listening.
Oh, yeah.
Is you can explain this to them. I'm very much saying, look, I don't know what to do here. As a parent, I've said that line before. I am clueless. I don't know what to do here. My expectation is this, and this is what's based on, and I'll explain all this. I just think, but you may want to do something. And if you can get a dialogue going, I don't know if it answers any better, but they become more comfortable with that. You become more comfortable with that. I have an expectation that, you're not going to steal. That's not something that you're not going to steal. There's some basic stuff. You're not going to harm people. You're not going to, abuse women. You're not going to, there's expectations. You're not going to drink and drive. Justin and I have a contract. When he started driving, he got his car, and, I pay for the insurance. He pays for the gas. By the way, I end up paying for the gas most of the time anyway, but it doesn't matter. And we go through the expectations. And so, if he gets a ticket, he has to pay the ticket and the increase in insurance. And then the one that came to, these questions are on this contract, and said, what happens if you smell alcohol after he's been driving? I said, I want to be really clear. I take your keys, I sell the car, and when you're 18, you can buy your own. That is a non-negotiable in my house. Alcohol and driving, a non-negotiable. And by the way, he's 18 and it never happened. But my point is, it is, I was very clear ahead of time. If you sipped a beer and you're driving the car that I'm insuring, that I paid for, and you're risking other people's lives, then you will not drive and by any mechanism that I'm providing. And that's my right to do that. And there's never been a problem with Justin like that. I have a blood alcohol thing here, thing you blow in, breathalyzer, and I've never opened the box. I mean, he's never given me a lick of expectation of what that is. And I'm sure one day he will take it, but he won't drive. He's like, and he knows me. He knows very clear on that. So those expectations, there's certain expectations that, especially communicated, could be life and death. I also lost a child in a car wreck. So I have more, that's probably not, I'm not comparing myself to other parents, but I'm more aware of that for sure, of those concepts of being able to, you're not immortal. And
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. And I told him when he, coming home at night, these things, I said, son, losing TJ was the hardest thing that ever, and I survived it. I don't think I could ever survive another one. So I just need you to understand that I'm not going to be rational. You may think I'm overprotective or whatever, but I just have to have certain things in play that and he's very, again, I'm using Justin because he is such a great kid, but the expectations, identifying the expectations and talking with your kids about it. They're listening despite what you think. And then, maybe a dialogue develops. And once they understand, then there's more ability to see, is this making sense or not? And we can always, a lot of parents with their kids have a hard time saying, I was wrong. I don't know why that is, but I all the time say, yeah, I was way off on that one, if I need to. I've never had a problem saying I'm wrong when it comes to that. But I know a lot of families, they just can't admit I was wrong. It's just, I don't know what that is either.
Yeah. And if I had to hazard a guess, I would imagine probably something got handed down from generation to generation. Yeah. That's something that got inherited, so to speak.
I grew up in a household that I never remember anybody in my family ever saying I'm wrong. We would argue. I remember arguing over stuff I was not even close to right about, but I was just conditioned to argue.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. When you posted about this topic, because you posted about it just a day or two ago, can you talk about what inspired you to share that particular post? I think it was a share that you did.
It was a share.
Yeah.
It was the Instagram. A guy was talking about, and it was getting into other things, but it was basically just understanding the concept. To me, the idea, our kids are individuals, and we were programmed by our family with the best of intentions. The inner dialogue we have as children were programmed by our family. Our belief system was programmed by our family, and that carried on. And these things get handed down generationally.
Yeah.
One of the things that I believe happens as time goes on, we don't have the ability to adjust that sometimes. We don't have the ability to question that. And what really got me with it is I believe that kids have the potential to have a resilience, the potential to live this. It's a delicate balance. And I just what made me post it was just so intense that I work with so many families that I have seen expectation destroy relationships between kids and their parents. I've just seen that many times. And I think it's sort of the parent's job to realize that, I think. It's not the kid's job. It's like,
where do you think the line is between an expectation panning out well and expectation destroying a relationship and even destroying the life of a kid?
Not listening to the kid, probably. Not listening. Now, I'm not saying they're always right, but at least being able to hear an argument. At least being able to hear why they feel this way, why they, the young man that wants to, play the piano and wants to, do whatever. And no, you need to do this. You need to do that. This one's really good. This actually, one of my examples here fits perfectly. There's a lady that I was working with her son, and he's a great kid. I love this guy. He's a grown man now, but at the time he was 15, and her neighbor's son was doing coding for some company from home, and he was also 15. And they were paying him at the time like $100 an hour to do coding. It was crazy.
Wow.
And he was really good at it. So she goes to her son and says, I want you to go do coding. And he goes, I'm not doing coding. I hate that. It's not my thing. And instead of just saying, well, I didn't know if you'd be interested in maybe making $100 an hour, our neighbor did, she said, well, Tim, whatever the kid's name was, he's doing coding and he's making $100 an hour and you're skateboarding. Well, that's an example right there. That's certainly not helping the relationship, but also this kid with ADHD had no chance of being able to sit there and code. Just didn't know. That would be like Walt, you saying, Joel, will you code some stuff for me? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
You can't. No, you can't.
That would, well, I could try to imagine it, but it's not a pretty picture. Let's put it that way.
There would be you would get nothing back. I'd say, I'll get on it right away, Walt. And no, I wouldn't, because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know what it really means. I learned that word. I don't even know what it really means. So, but that's an example of crossing the line with it. The expectations that are built on things other than the child's best interest often. Now, wanting him to be successful and being able to make $100 an hour, there's nothing wrong with that if possible, but doing it because the kid next door is doing it and it would look so good to her friends to do it. There's a lot of those factors there. So I think the underlying cause and the reason of your expectations, I like sort of an inventory as I'm discussing this, is this expectation built on my wants and needs? Is this expectation something I inherited from my parents? And one of the things that I have my childhood was so bizarre and so dysfunctional. And so, as you know, I had such a great example of what not to do. I can just simply say, this is what those people did. And so clearly I just have to discount if they were doing that, this is, yes, let's go over here. It's just that, but and I'm not trying to make the parents out as bad. As I said, nobody has a child with the intent of messing them up.
Right.
Things happen, and a lot of this stuff is from unhealed trauma in the parents that translates to the kid. I don't want you to go through what I went through. I don't want you to have to do what I did. That's a driving factor in a lot of this. And sometimes the kids got to do what they got to do to get where they need to get. As I mentioned, I don't have the life I have today without incredibly screwing everything up for a while and then getting myself together. It was all necessary to get to where I'm at. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not recommending anybody do any of that.
No.
But it certainly makes sense. So it's an ongoing thing. And I do like the theory, and I'm going to do some, plant the idea. I've got a researcher guy that is really into some of the stuff you and I talk about. I like the idea of expectation playing such a role in all this.
I think it's huge. It's really huge. And I think it's basically understated and underrecognized.
Yeah. Yes. And different expectations. Sometimes no expectation is a far healthier environment than the wrong expectations or unhealthy expectations.
I remember I mentioned that I helped to actually I was the leader of founding this particular school where the kids were in charge. And I remember so much about what happened in that process. One of the things that really stood out to me at the time was how my perception of the kids was quite different in many cases from the parents' perception of the kids. And the real reason was I didn't really think of them as kids. I thought of them as little people, little adults.
Yeah.
Adults in training, so to speak.
Yeah.
But the parents, not always, but often saw them as just little kids who will always be little kids. Yes. They in many cases had trouble seeing them being more than that, or if they could see them being more than that, it had to be along the lines of the parents' own expectations. In other words, they had trouble visualizing that kid growing into whoever the kid was going to be, regardless of what the parent wanted. That gave a lot of parents a lot of trouble.
Well, it does. It also biologically, when you raise a child, you see them differently. When I meet with usually the youngest I meet with is about 10 or 11. Most of them are 14 and above. But a 10, 11-year-old, they're much more in depth. I know 10-year-olds that I work with, and my neighbor who's 11 that I've known since he's been 4. He and I have, and his mom says this before. She says, "You have a different connection. I talk to him I see him differently. She sees him as this little boy that grew up, and he's to her, he's sort of a handful sometimes. I think he's hilarious, and to me, like his grandmother one time, he went with Justin and I on vacation one time, and she jokingly texted me, said, have you lost your mind yet? And I go, I have a different experience with him than you do. He's a pleasure. He never does anything other than listen. He's amazing because my expectations of him are so different than theirs. And, I just see him as one of the smartest people I've ever met. I'm fascinated with how his brain works, and I treat him that way. And to them, they're they're his son, and they don't get to see that side of him. And he acts differently around us because of those expectations.
Well, that also raises a question in my mind, because you just described how you were able to appreciate a side of him that his parents didn't see. So the question in my mind is there anything that a parent can do in order to see their kids in a way they haven't seen them before?
And that's a way to look at it. When you see, I had mentioned TJ. TJ was my wild child. You never knew what TJ was going to do. I mean, he was always out there. So one time I met these people, neighbors, and I was at the pool where we lived in South Carolina, and the guy was talking. He goes, I told him, introduced myself, Joel Elston. He said, "Are you TJ's dad?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, what's about to come up?" Because I was expecting, oh boy, here comes the TJ story. And he goes, "He is the most polite child that's ever walked into my house."
Wow.
I go, "No, I'm TJ's dad, TJ Elston, not I don't know who was in your house, but it was not my son. Maybe you got the names mixed up." And it was, it was, am I kidding? I was flabbergasted that was, and he said, yeah, he's talking about, you guys, have a house in Florida and you have this, and he talks to you. I mean, it was just this different image of all that. And a lot of people would tell me that. And, TJ was able to do that. But I think one of the ways to answer your question is, first of all, try to see it through other people's eyes. Not you know all of your child's flaws. You know everything that they ever did wrong. You know how their insecurities. You know all this, but trying to step back from that and just watch how they operate. What are they really into? What are they really good at? And try to put a new set of eyes on them. And it's hard to let go of some of that stuff. But I've worked with allegedly some of the quote unquote worst kids ever. And I just have never, I just see them differently, and none of them ever act. I mean, they all treat me differently because I truly see them differently. Right. And we talked multiple times about the studies, repeated studies, starting in California, expectations, you convince the teachers that they're teaching a genius, and then the kids IQ. Yeah. That's happened, been repeated thousands of times, and it's that way. And so I really, my connection with young people is I speak to them as the person that I see them as. I speak to them as little people, as you're saying, like, what are they doing right? What are they, and I've spoken with kids that have done a lot of quote unquote wrong, but I can, most of the time I can find that piece in them that nobody else is seeing because the other stuff is overshadowing it so much. Well, your own kids, just trying to reset that filter, it's just trying to reset and see them and be sort of amazed because your expectations of them are built of, well, when he was 2, he did this, or 3, he did that. And it's like, he's a different person now.
I think we're kind of coming in the back door of something that is a really important point. I mean, you were expressing it in terms of how, as the parent, all the things that they did wrong. But to kind of flip that script around, I suggest even that a great way to see your kid differently is to focus on the things to appreciate about him.
Absolutely.
Because the first one is focusing on all the things that they did wrong, right? But they also did a lot of things right. Yeah. And it might be a good place to start after you've recognized that you have expectations. Maybe the next step after that is to say, what parts of that kid do I think is good? What part of that do I think is a pretty cool kid? Right.
Well, and that helps so much because when I see the kids, most of the people I work with are very bright kids. Most of them have ADHD and they have a perception that they're not bright. But when I'm able to convince them that they're very bright and they have ADHD, and it's not manifesting in the way the school sort of measures intelligence, but they're very smart. They're great at solving complex puzzles. On stuff they're interested in, they have a laser focus that nobody could match. When you have a hyper focused ADHD kid, they are on.
Oh yeah.
And when you look at that, because that negative dialogue that a lot of them have programmed from what they quote unquote were doing wrong. You never pay attention. You have sloppy handwriting. You have, it's like I have always had the worst handwriting I've always had, since I've been a little kid. I went handwriting specialist, and it's just I've just got terrible handwriting. And now, since I don't write much now, I type or have somebody type stuff for me. So when I write a check, for example, on the rare occasion I have to write a check, I have to spend a lot of energy drawing my letters because
I hear you.
Because I just don't, when I sign my name, it's just, that's all that is. But I've always had the expectation of bad handwriting, and I have always had bad handwriting, and at this point likely will continue to have bad handwriting, and it's just part of that programming. I don't know if I would have been challenging that or I could have focused on that, but I was always told that, always had it, and reinforced it. It became a fact in my life. And,
Yeah.
and in today's world, I just don't care. So it's not an energy
Right.
and effort for me to change that. But if I were doing an experiment and I cared enough to do it, what if I were to go take handwriting classes again with the effort to change that? Could I get new motor skills? I know I could. But the lacking factor is I don't care. So, that's what would not allow that to work. But you see my point,
Yeah.
finding what's right and not repeating what you think is wrong. Yes, this happened, but this kid's different now. What does he become? What's his interest? And again, that, when kids talk to me, but they're fascinated with stuff like, when I talk to the parents about it, he's really bright. Dad asked me the other day, I met with a kid and I met with the mom and dad afterwards to sort of figure out what our plan's going to be. And I said, he's exceptionally smart. And the dad interrupted me and he wasn't being mean. He goes, how do you figure?
Mm.
And I said, I went through the things that I noticed. I said, first of all, you're measuring, because he's talking about the kid's grades. I said, you're looking at the grades. I care less about his grades. I'm talking about the stuff he knows, his recall, his ability to have a deep, in-depth conversation, his reasoning. I was asking him different questions. I said, he is very quick. He has that. And I went through the thing and his dad goes, you're the first person we've come across that have ever used the word bright for him.
Mm.
And I said, because I'm using a different sort of experience. I'm looking at it differently. I said, and the fact you believe that, what they've always told you, you're part. I'm not saying you're part of the problem, but you're part of the feeding that. He sort of believes that too. The kid told me, I'm not that smart.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, you are. I said, you're using a different measuring stick, and
Right.
that's I always I have that little plaque on the wall. Albert Einstein's quote: "If you measure a fish's intelligence by its ability to climb a tree, it will appear to be stupid."
Yeah.
And that's the case. A fish can't
true.
climb a tree, but it's in the water. It's going to be great. So, learning to learn your kids again and trying to get a different set of eyes on it. It's like, it's amazing. It's just because
I agree.
And with people in general, not just kids, not just the parent trap concept here. People have a general when you sort of meet them, and I try to use, no matter who they are, what their appearance are, what they're bringing to the table. I try to I use the concept of unconditional positive regard whenever possible.
Mm.
Whatever they're doing, I'll try to bring that to the table. Not everybody's receptive to that, but nonetheless, I try to use that concept, and for the most part, I get really positive stuff back.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. That's one to remember and to take with us. One of the reasons I even decided to go after this idea of the expectations that parents in particular, but any kind of adult child situation, but that parents in particular have about their kids. The reason I wanted to make that a topic was because, like I said, I helped to found that school. I played a significant role in that. And among other things, that has led me over the years to be very interested in conversing with parents about their relationships with their kids and how their kids turned out, and what kind of work do they do, and all the stuff that parents express about their kids. And there's a very strong pattern that I think most people would easily dismiss. Let me tell you why. The pattern is the ones who have the quote good kids will all talk about how good their kids are. The ones who have the quote problem kids will talk about what a problem their kids are. And I think most of us will just kind of fall into the easy conclusion that they're saying that because that's the way the kids turned out. But when I have my conversations with these people, it becomes really evident to me that the kids turned out the way they did because of the parents' expectations. So the parents who are talking about their kids in glowing terms were doing so all along. Mm-hmm. And the parents who talk about their kids as being problems were doing so all along. Mm-hmm. So it was actually a reverse cause and effect from what people would normally think. It was actually the expectations were driving the way the kid was developing. So I'm really glad we had this conversation because
really good one.
I think it needs to be brought out a lot more, and I'm glad we brought it out today.
Very good one. I'm appreciative of the topic.
I am as well. So, and I'm appreciative of you, my friend. My God, you are so good with stories. I mean, I didn't even tell you what the topic was. Look at what 25 stories that came out in the last hour. I mean, it was crazy.
There's a lot of stuff stored in there, Walt, and it's not all pretty, by the way. It's not all pretty.
You are a well of information and wisdom, and I certainly appreciate you, my friend. So thank you very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.